I started singing when I was 4. And then when the war started, Second World War, I was 6, and we switched to a Uncle Sam's suit, and I sang for Liberty Bond drives, basically World War One songs still, because I hadn't composed any new ones. And then finally went into God Bless America as soon as that was published. But my parents wanted me to go music. I had a wonderful high school music teacher by the name of Gene Ferguson, who became quite well known as an opera singer. He did 20 years in Germany and then taught for 20 years at South Carolina University. But I was lucky enough to have him for 2 years in Concordia High School. And he encouraged me. And then I also had a minister, a young minister, who was one of the members of the original quartet that backed Elvis Presley, before Presley. But he played piano by ear and could make it rock. And he, when I was 16, informed me that I would be conducting the hymn singing the next Sunday. And then the week after that, he said, well, that was all right, but now this time you conduct it. And so that started me conducting. And I eventually had that choir. And now when I went to college, I started out as a geography major. But my parents were really worried that I would go to hell as a geographer. The head of the music department gave me, that's why I'm bald, he gave me Dutch rubs until I changed my major and ended up with a double major in music, education, and geography. Actually, it was a 10-year period because I taught 4 years, resigned in anger. I was mad. I wanted to make more money. And I worked for a music company for 1 year. But then that's when I really made up my mind that I was a teacher and not a businessman, and went back into teaching 5 more years at Grandview before moving to Oak Park. Joyce Sturmer was the first choral director at Oak Park and built a hellacious program. She was really great, and we're going to miss her now. But she burned out, literally. She worked such a fantastically large program that it wore her out, and she resigned. And the first year that she was out, she didn't do anything. Went to Europe, but then became a faculty member at Ottawa University. But one of the other choral directors in the North Kansas City School District was Rick Wymuth, and Rick had done his student teaching with me. And as soon as Joyce resigned, he called and said, Oak Park is open, you should go after it. And so did Joyce. She called and wanted me to go after it, and I did, and was fortunate enough to get the job. Just fantastic move. I didn't want to move. I had a good job. But this one turned out to be just as good, if not even a little bit better. And because I had facilities, for one thing, that I never had at Grandview. And that made a big difference. Dan Kaler, oh my. The first years that I taught at Grandview, and this is all with Dan, the first years that I taught at Grandview, no administrator ever entered my room. Never. They never saw me teach. They never saw what was going on until I had resigned to go to Oak Park. And the principal came in and sat there for about 20 minutes of class. The bell rang and the class moved out. And as he went past me, he said, by God, you work. And it made me mad. And I said, by God, what do you think I've been doing for 10 years? I said, I'm sure. But Dan, the first year I was at Oak Park, and again, after no administrator had ever entered my room, I had the door open during men's choir, because it was very hot and the room was stuffy. So the door was open and Dan walked by. And he looked in, and there was an empty seat with a piece of music sitting in it. And Dan walked in and sat down and picked up the music and started singing. And I about passed out. I was not ready for that by any means, but oh my, that started it with Dan Kaler. Let's face facts. If you're in this business, your first year is always the hardest. And I don't care if your predecessor is good, bad, or indifferent. There are those students who love that teacher, and they should. That's great. That's great. But the first year teacher coming in has to survive. That's the first thing, just survival. And Joyce had built such a program, and the choir, that was also the first year for mod scheduling. And I was supposed to have half of the choir 2 days a week, the other half 2 days a week, and then meet as a unit 1 day a week. Except it never worked that way. There would be some kids come in the second session who were also there for the first. And on Friday, when we were supposed to have the full group, we didn't because there were class conflicts. So we would get together on stage to decide and find out what we sounded like on a concert. And there were kids who just were very, very unhappy. And to be very honest, so was I. I'd come home totally frustrated because I couldn't tell what my choir was going to sound like. And the kids started fighting me. They did. And there were two young men in the class who were star football players. And one was the president of the choir, the other vice president. And one day they came in a little bit early and said, "Mr. Grace, we want you to leave the classroom today." And, "Well, why?" I said, "Well, we're going to have a meeting." Well, I left the classroom, but to be very honest, I stood right out in the hall and listened through the door to see what was going on. And they didn't know that. But they got up there and said, "Look, we love Joyce Sturmer. She was great, and she is great, but she's no longer here, and we're not giving this man a chance." And I tell you what, those two boys are the reason I stayed at Oak Park for 24 years. They made it for me. And we started doing things. We did Oklahoma the first year as a musical, and there were kids who thought it was going to fall flat on its face because we were doing it differently than they were used to. And it became a hit, and I think that helped me as well. We did not participate in music contests at that time. The only participation in music contests would be a phony deal. We would construct small ensembles out of the leads of the musical and take them to contest basically to get them out of school for a full day. And the musical was in the spring at that time, and you could not do both. But then later we started adding contests, and it became a big thing, and the musical moved to the fall. I used to judge the success of a rehearsal on how badly I was sweating after it was over with. And that's really part of it, I would think, because if the music is exuberant and you're working hard, you're going to break a sweat. You just will. In fact, as one student said that I reminded him of a cabbage in the grocery store produce with the mister on it. I imagine that's true. But doggone it, one of the stories that I would give the kids, if they were going to go swimming and they walked to the edge of the pool and stuck their big toe in and said I was there, no, you aren't. You've got to dive in and go all the way before you can really say you've been swimming. And the same thing is true with them. I used to get uptight if kids would say, "I don't like that piece." And I would come back with them, "All right, that's fine that you feel that way now, but actually wait until we perform it. And you know it, and you know it well, before you say you don't like it. And then after we've done that, if you say you don't like it, I will respect it. But as of right now, you don't know yet. You don't know it well enough to make that decision." Maybe that's why I was successful. I don't know. I think I was successful. But I think also having fun with it is one of the reasons I was successful. And enjoying the kids and loving the kids, I think, is part of the reason I was successful. It was just an interplay. They allowed me. Here's the one thing you cannot forget, please. These kids don't always know what the point of excellence is. And they allowed me to take them there. They allowed me to take them, and they didn't have to do that. If a kid comes into my class and says, "By George, you ain't going to teach me nothing, teach," and I won't. I can't. They've got to allow me to do it. It can't be them, I've got to have something from them as well. And I only kicked 2 kids out in all the years that I taught. And both of them, well, I won't go to that. That shouldn't be done. But I kicked 2 kids out over 33 years. And if I couldn't handle the discipline, I didn't belong as a teacher. But also, I once, in fact, there's a principal once showed me the job application for a teaching a position that we had, and one of his philosophy of education, teaching, and it was 3 words: keep 'em busy. And you know what? That ain't bad. That ain't bad. If they're working hard, and you keep them busy, you're not going to have discipline problems. They don't have time to give you discipline problems. And I still hear on Facebook. I still hear from this young man, and he's going to young man, not young anymore. But when he was a freshman, we were working sight reading, and we would start with the entire class attempting a 4-measure phrase, unison at first, and then in parts. And then we'd get to the place where I would have a section do it, and then eventually to where each student was expected to sight read this 4-measure thing. And a young tenor, freshman class, was working, and he had tried to sing this 4-measure thing, and just fallen apart the whole time. And unfortunately, what he said is true. He threw his music down on the floor, looked at him and said, "Mr. Grace, I don't want to be a musician. I just want to be a singer." And unfortunately, with many singers, that's just about the way it is. They want to be a singer and not a musician. And I'm sorry, you can't not be a singer without being a musician. You also have to understand what you're doing and why you're doing and the meaning of it all. And that young man is still singing today, and I have an idea he's a pretty good musician, even though at one time he didn't want to be. I really enjoyed teaching. There were some things that I didn't enjoy, but that was in the minority. Basically, the idea of going in and facing my choir every day and working with them, it was a challenge. It was never boring. It was a challenge, and I enjoyed it so very, very much. And I know there are a lot of people, and teachers as well, that hate what they do. I know some teachers that hate kids, and I just can't imagine that. They cannot succeed. It's just no way. But I love the kids, and I think we had a mutual love association going. My nickname with them is Papa, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that. But to make up your mind to do something that is a challenge, but to do something that you really enjoy doing day after day after day. And I did. I was lucky. I sing in the Liberty United Methodist Church Choir, and fine director, and Brian Taylor, who also sings with the Kansas City Chorale, and he's just a good man, good choral man. But he does the same thing that I do, and this man just recently passed away. He said, "Bill, how do you hear the choir if you are singing?" Well, you learn to do so, and you don't outsing the choir. You it's kind of hard to conduct it and not sing because you become involved with the music. And so does Brian, and so do I, and I always did. That's a no-no at contest. And so I had to be very careful if I heard something that start to go wrong in a section, and I'd jump there. And certainly not with the girls. I could not sing with them. That was a no-no. But hey, it worked, and I never got caught. The first band director that I taught with would sing with the band. And one time he took his band to contest, and he got the criticism sheets back, and one of the judges said, "Your band was good, but the baritone was terrible." That was part of it. That was part of it. The students looking upon you, or me in this case, as a mentor is scary. You're afraid that what you might do, taken incorrectly, or you're afraid you're making a mistake. There are kids that I had, and I keep using the word kids, and they're certainly no longer kids, but there are students that I had that I thought I had never, ever gotten across to. I had never communicated with them. And let's face facts, that can happen. You can't get along with everybody and everything every day. But then 3 or 4 or maybe even more years later, you get a note from them, and they are expressing their appreciation for what I did for them. And I had no idea that I had communicated with them to that point. Just it's scary. It is scary. We have two grandkids now who are majoring in music. One at Kansas State University in music education, and one at Fort Hays State who is majoring in music technology. Our daughters, we have two daughters who are vocal teachers, and one is also a national officer in the American Choral Directors Association. And come February, we're all going to go together, and we are the only family in the United States that has a three-generation active membership in this national organization. Kind of neat, kind of neat. I'm on Facebook, and I know Ann sometimes think I spend too much time there because about the first thing I do in the morning is to turn it on, turn the computer on, and see what the emails are. And then I go to Facebook, usually to my oldest daughters, to find out what she's put on there because she's on there every day as well. And you check and you get there's a bit on the email right now from students that I had at Grandview. One of the boys has taken recordings that we made there and put it on the internet, and the fidelity is not the best, but I tell you what, the memories are. And that's great. It's really great. And I enjoy hearing from these kids and find out, kids, there it is again, and finding out what they're doing and what their family life is like. And you can't beat it. I'm sorry. I didn't get paid $1 million in salary, but I did in associations. That's great. That's great. And they can't tax that.